wants to make. He made a great effort to make them then. I think the House of Commons is blessed with a number of very bright MPs, and I think he should just gently reflect upon the language he uses sometimes. You know, I think that the level of debate in this place does need to lift sometimes, and he can assist us in delivering that.
Jacob Beer.
Following what the Prime Minister said upon arrival in India, could the leader give an update on what the whipping arrangement for Conservative MPs will be this afternoon?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He'll see the Chief Whip in his place. The Prime Minister has indicated that he is keen for the House to decide on the business later today. The vote on the unamended House business will be a free vote to all Conservative MPs, and that will be the case this afternoon.
Angus Brendan McNeill.
Mr. Speaker, it was remiss earlier of me not to wish Her Majesty a happy birthday, indeed, English friends. Happy St George's Day on Saturday. But what was even more remiss was the International Trade Department's gliding over and ignoring of the appalling export trade figures. Just to remind the House, the UK is down 14% on exports, while the rest of the world is up 8.2% in the same period. So, can we have a debate on which is failing? Is it Brexit or the Department, or perhaps it's both?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, he's just had the opportunity to ask the Secretary of State at the Department questions before this statement. I think the UK has a great opportunity following Brexit to reach out, and that's what the Prime Minister is doing today in India itself. There are 11,000 jobs that have been created by the trade deal and the trade negotiations the Prime Minister is talking to the Indian government about today. That's a huge opportunity for the UK government now they're outside of the EU, and he should celebrate and welcome that investment around the world.
Mr. Speaker, does my right honourable friend believe, as I do, that a debate would be useful to discuss the actions that the Electoral Commission might take in directing all local councils to use simplified postal voting forms, as this will be beneficial in ensuring less technically spoiled ballot papers and hence ensure turnout figures at local elections across the country are increased?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend. Such a debate would be very timely given the upcoming local elections. We'll have Lord's amendments to the Elections Bill next week, and there may be an opportunity for my honourable friend to raise the matter directly with ministers during that debate.
Deputy Peacock.
I'm very grateful. I visited the local food bank in Barnsley, who have seen record levels of demand in recent years, with the main reason for referral being low income. As bills and prices rise, can we have a debate in government time on how this government is failing working people and failing to tackle the cost of living crisis?
Well, I'd say to the honourable lady, I hope she would recognise that following Vladimir Putin's invasion of Russia, that has caused huge ripples around the world in terms of prices of energy and prices of food. The government does take that seriously. That's why we're supplying huge amounts of investment to try and protect those families who are most vulnerable from the cost of living increases. That's why we've changed the tapers on universal credit to allow those people who are in work claiming universal credit to keep more of their money. That's why we've reduced the tax on fuel so that people can try and afford the increasing cost of petrol. There's a huge amount the government is doing to try and support those families who are most vulnerable, but also spread the cost of taxation to those who have the broadest shoulders.
Bob Blackman.
Residents constantly contact me about the state of roads and pavements in the London Borough of Harrow. I put this down to the inefficiency of the Labour-run council. But the Sun on Saturday published the real reason, with £2 million of council taxpayers' money being given to contractors and contractors not actually doing the work, and then council staff receiving kickbacks. Now, the reality of this is there's an ongoing police investigation on this particular issue. I understand that every member of that department has now either resigned, retired or been sacked, and the council taxpayers naturally say, our council is involved, what has been going on? This has been covered up for 8 months, Mr. Speaker. So could we therefore have a debate next week on corruption in local government and transparency, and whether it is Liverpool, Croydon or Harrow, Labour-run councils are corrupt.
Mr. Speaker, well, I thank my friend for raising this matter. It is an important principle that local government is independent of central government. I understand the Council is cooperating with the police on this matter. The government will take whatever steps are necessary to ensure the good record of transparency, probity and scrutiny and accountability are maintained across councils in this country. And my honourable friend is doing an excellent job of shining a light on the woeful track record of the Labour-run council in Harrow. And I would encourage voters there and across the country to vote Conservative on the 5th of May.
I'll wait to you. Carolyn Darrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in keeping in the theme of today being menopause questions, can I just highlight that women in England, despite promises by the government to introduce reduced charges, still has not happened. My attempts to get answers for these women about costs and, in fact, the shortage has been thwarted by the Department of Health and Social Care. 3 weeks for a response to an urgent letter. Responses to name-day questions arriving 10 days late. The answers being nothing that would not have been available at the time of asking. This shows a total disregard for women, and we must stop treating women in this way. Can the Leader of the House please help me to help the 13 million menopausal women in this country who are deserved our respect?
So I think the direct answer is yes, I will assist her, and I recognise and pay tribute to the work that she's done in this area. She is a huge campaigner on these matters, and I recognise her contribution in this debate. I will write on her behalf to the Secretary of State for Health, and also recognise that we do need to do better in terms of responding timely to matters raised by colleagues across the floor. I'll assist her in that matter.
Sir Robertson.
Mr. Speaker, I've always been a strong supporter of the Scouting movement, either as an MP and prior. Indeed, my son achieved the Queen's Scout Award. But, however, last week the District Commissioner asked me not to attend an event, and I quote, "The Scouts is a non-political movement. I would not wish this positive message to be muddied by recent controversial incidents and policies." The Leader advised me how I go forward to continue to support the Scouting movement.
Shame's been.
Well, I thank you for a question. I'm disappointed to hear that. I think colleagues across the House will recognise the great contribution that Scouting makes to young people in this country. As a former Cub and Scout myself, I thoroughly enjoyed my time. It is a non-political organisation that shouldn't get involved and traditionally has not got involved in politics. And I hope the leader who wrote to her will reflect upon his comments and encourage colleagues across the House to engage with the Scouting movement.
Christian Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do hope that Chester Zoo's success in becoming the second most popular tourist attraction in the UK won't overshadow some of the important scientific work and achievements that it is doing, such as protecting rainforests through its palm oil campaign and the outstanding work in developing a virus for elephant herpes that will save thousands of elephants. So can we have a debate, please, about the work of zoos in promoting science and sustainability and environmentalism?
So I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. I think that would be something that is very much worthy of debate. I would encourage him to apply for a backbench business debate or an adjournment debate on that matter. And I join in congratulating not only Chester Zoo, but zoos up and down the country that are actually contributing to that debate, informing the next generation on such matters and contributing to the debate.
James Daly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Recently, the Egyptian-born hate preacher Omar Abdul Kafi went on a UK tour, giving lectures at Finsbury Park Mosque in London and a number of venues in Leeds, Liverpool and Mayfair. Abdul Kafi has previously given sermons about killing Jews. He's advanced anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and is known to have directly inspired the Stockholm suicide bomber Taimour Abdul Wahab. Given these facts, can we have a debate on how on earth such an individual was allowed to enter the country and how it's compatible with the government's wider prevent strategy?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. Anti-Semitism has absolutely no place in our society. We expect anyone involved in spreading hate to face the full extent of the law, which is why the UK has a robust hate crime tools to support the investigation and prosecution of those who incite racial and religious hatred. I'm aware that the individual has made shocking remarks in the past, and I will raise my honourable friend's concerns with the Home Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mariana and her 3-year-old son Nestor fled the war in Ukraine to Poland. My constituent is sponsoring them under the Homes for Ukraine scheme. They completed their application on the 25th of March and they're still waiting for a decision. With nowhere to stay in Poland, they've had to return to Ukraine and spend 5 hours a day sheltering from air raids. These delays in expediting visas are putting innocent civilians at risk and not matching the generosity and compassion of the British public. Can we please have an urgent debate in government time on this?
Well, I thank her for her question. I think she's right to highlight the generosity of the UK and of the British people in welcoming refugees from Ukraine. I know the Lord Harrington does meet MPs on a regular basis, and I'm sure he would be available to her should she request such a meeting to try and expedite the visa application that she mentions. But we have issued 56,000 visas already. There are a number of schemes that are up and running, and we continue to keep our borders open to those people who find themselves in the most difficult of circumstances.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would my right honourable friend join me in congratulating my constituents Rory and Cheryl Thorpe, who, with your fantastic support, Mr. Speaker, have become the first small gin producers to have their gin, Ruddy Fine Gin, stocked here in Parliament under the new Guest Gin scheme? And can we have a debate in government time on how we in Parliament and government can best showcase Britain's fantastic small food and drink producers to the world?
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for a question, and I personally committed to showcasing how we can support and sample the many superb food and drink producers from across the United Kingdom, but especially Nottinghamshire. And I had the pleasure of meeting Rory and Cheryl myself from the Ruddy Fine Gin Company last night. I can highly recommend it, and I pay tribute to them and the Honourable Lady for promoting UK food. There's a great opportunity for the UK around the world, and the Ruddy Gin Company is a great part of that.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the House may be aware that tomorrow marks the 4th annual Stephen Lawrence Day, following the tragic racist death of Stephen Lawrence in 1993. The day was established by the former Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead. The IOPC recently released a report stating that the stop and search was causing trauma and damaging confidence in policing, despite the police's promise for reform. Correct stop and search works, it helps, but a number of black people still don't have confidence in the stop and search and powers that the police are using. Can we please have an urgent debate on the police's use of stop and search?
So I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. I think she's right to once again draw attention of the House to this important matter. I think the Metropolitan Police clearly work as hard as they can to protect all communities across London, but I do recognise the concerns that some of those communities have about these measures, and it is something which is worthy of debate. I would encourage her to apply for a Westminster Hall debate.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents and those in neighbouring constituencies have been greatly inconvenienced at the moment by the appalling service being provided by TransPennine Express on their South TransPennine route. What should be an hourly service, this afternoon their website shows there will be 4 hours between trains. Could the leader arrange for the rail minister to come to the House and give a statement on how the rail operating companies are meeting their franchise commitments?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and I understand how concerned he will be about this matter. As we enter the summer period, I'm sure a lot of people will want to visit Cleethorpes, all it has to offer as a tourist destination, and rail transport to Cleethorpes will be an important part of the ability of people to get there and to celebrate all that is Cleethorpes. I will make sure the Secretary of State for Transport is aware of his comments and will respond to him directly.
Chris Stevens.
Speaker, on behalf of my constituent Ailsa Mackenzie, the Government placed a remedial order during summer recess to extend the eligibility for widowed parents' allowance and bereavement support payments, but it appears to have now laid the remedial order again without any explanation. So can the Leader update the House in progress on extending the eligibility for widowed parents' allowance and bereavement support payments to cohabitees with children to ensure that these people waited 3 years, that they will soon get their payments?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. I know it's something that he's raised in the past. I will make sure the Secretary of State for the Department of Work and Pensions writes to him directly with an answer and assist him in getting the answers he requires.
Very Sherman.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask the Leader of the House to make good something that I think is a real deficiency in the House? We've just had a recess. There's a war going on in Europe. A democratic country has been cruelly invaded, but President Putin this week has said sanctions aren't helping Russia. This House has had very few chances to talk about and be briefed on the war in Ukraine. Could we make that better next week and in the future? We need regular updates.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. I'm not sure he's entirely accurate. There is a debate on Tuesday, of course, where he'll be able to raise such matters. We've had 10 oral statements, 6 urgent questions, 3 opposition debates, a backbench business debate on the UK's relationship with Russia and China, a general debate on Ukraine, hours debate on Russian sanctions, departmental and oral questions and PMQs. I think there's been huge opportunity for the House to debate such matters, and I think, as I said, there'll be another opportunity next Tuesday for him to raise the matter again.
Go on, Jonathan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You're very generous. Last weekend was a massive weekend for British boxing because as Stokies were singing Delilah to their heart's content, it was Stoke-on-Trent's incredible sporting talent, Nathan Hitman Heaney, who retained his IBO middleweight title despite hitting the canvas for the very first time in his career. But as Nathan says, Mr. Speaker, you can't keep a Stokey down. So will my right honourable friend congratulate Nathan on his fantastic achievement and for continuing to make Stoke-on-Trent proud? And can time be found for us all across this House to debate the sporting heroes and icons in our local communities?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I think the House would recognise that you certainly can't get these Stokey down. I, of course, join him in congratulating Nathan Hitman Heaney on his retaining his title. I'm sure members across the House will find a debate on our constituency's sporting heroes a welcome one. It will provide an opportunity for the newly formed Nottingham Forest APPG to discuss the best team in the country.
Mr. Speaker, many of my constituents are living in shared ownership flats and are facing the multiple whammy of rising rents and mortgage payments, rising tax bills and rising service and heating charges over which they have no say. So will the Leader of the House find time for a debate after the Queen's speech on the cost of living crisis facing those in shared ownership?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. Of course, it's something which the Government takes seriously. We are providing a lot of help to those people who find themselves in those circumstances by maintaining the uplift of local housing allowance in cash terms, providing £100 million for the discretionary housing payments, on top of almost £1.5 billion in discretionary housing payments to local authorities since 2011. So, enormous amounts of support for those people who find themselves in those circumstances. We recognise the challenges that the invasion of Russia into Ukraine has driven into markets around the world, and it's something which the Government takes very seriously.
Speaker, in my brilliant local hospital, the RUH in Bath, there are about 100 beds at any point of patients who should be discharged but can't because there's no one to look after them in the community or at home. Can we have a statement from the Government of what the Government is doing about the urgent crisis in social care recruitment?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her question, and I hope she will recognise, actually, this is the first government to genuinely try and tackle the challenges of adult social care in the country. That's why we've introduced the levy to support the NHS in fighting its backlog, but to break down the barriers between healthcare and adult social care. It's something that the Secretary of State for Health is working on as we speak, and I hope as we progress through the House she'll be there to support the government in delivering on that challenge.
Hardy.
The COVID pandemic has had a revolutionary change in the way that we work, with many jobs being able to be successfully completed remotely. Could we have a debate in government time on how the benefits of remote working can increase productivity, especially in areas like Hull, because it means that people don't have to leave the area they love for the job they want?
For a question, it is something which is very much worthy of debate. I know a number of people have found working from home convenient to them. We need to get that balance right between productivity in the workplace and delivering for the UK economy. Of course, there may be opportunities for the government here to save taxpayers money by reducing the number of desks in Westminster and exporting some of those jobs up and down the country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Al-Aqsa Mosque is one of the holiest sites in Islam, and it's one of the very few places that Palestinians can exercise a degree of sovereignty. Recently, during this holy month of Ramadan, we've seen violence, with over 150 Palestinians injured in clashes with Israeli police. The conflict has potential to escalate further, and so will the Leader of the House make way in government time for a debate on the rights of the Palestinian people?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. I think it should be the right of every human being to live in security and in peace. These are, of course, delicate matters, and I'm sure there would be an opportunity for Foreign Office questions to ask ministers directly how they can assist in bringing peace to the area.
Final question, Alex Davis-Jones.
I'm sure the Leader of the House is as excited as I am about last week's announcement by WWE that they plan to bring their first UK stadium tour to Principality Stadium in September. This will hopefully be a massive boost to the South Wales economy and also inspire a new generation of British wrestling superstars and fans. So with that in mind, will the Leader of the House commit to a debate in government time on the benefit of these big cultural and sporting events to the UK?
Well, I join the Honourable Lady in celebrating that investment and in all that is WWE. It's clearly a great sport. If that brings investment to South Wales, that's great news, and I'm sure she'll continue to champion her area in this chamber.
That ends business questions. Point of order, John MacDonald.
I apologise to members for delaying the debate overall, but this was the first opportune time I've had to been able to do this, and it has to be done promptly after the event itself. I was on a statutory instrument committee yesterday dealing with a DWP matter and simply asked the question for the rationale behind the urgency of the proposal being brought forward by the government. The Minister's response then was that I would know more if I visited my local job centre more frequently, and accused me of not visiting it, I think, for about 5 years. It was completely untrue. I'm a regular visitor to the job centre, as I am in other institutions. But the issue it raises with me is one of privilege. Does this mean that the government is now monitoring the visits of members of this House to government departments for use in political debate? Because if that is the case, let me just say I have a brilliant working relationship with my local job centre. The staff work incredibly hard, but most of our communication is via emails and telephones, etc. However, if our visits to government offices are to be monitored, it will no longer be emails or telephones. I'll insist on a meeting at the tax office, the job centre, the border office and every other government agency within my constituency. This is a matter of parliamentary privilege, Mr Speaker, and I'd like you to look into the matter.
Can I first of all say I thank the honourable gentleman for notice of that point of order. The incident he recounts is indeed surprising, and I have noted that the Leader of the House has heard it. We will leave it there for now, but I will follow up on it. Point of order, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Prime Minister's comments on Tuesday night to his backbenchers were briefed to journalists by a spokesperson. Those comments were reasonably interpreted by several media outlets, including the Daily Telegraph, as being criticisms of the Archbishop of Canterbury and the BBC for their comments and coverage of Ukraine. Government ministers were out on broadcast rounds yesterday morning and they didn't seek to correct that interpretation. But, Mr Speaker, since then, the government has corrected the record and said the Prime Minister's comments only referred to the Archbishop and not the BBC. So I'm more than happy to echo that correction and withdraw my comments of yesterday. Thank you.
Well, that draws a line under that. Right, before we begin, I believe it would assist the House if I remind members of the decision in question and the procedure on this motion. The decision before the House is whether or not to refer the matter to the Committee of Privileges at this time. It will be for the committee to report back on whether it considers there has been a contempt. Whilst it is perfectly in order for the honourable members to question the veracity of the Prime Minister's responses to the House cited in the motion, it is not in order to challenge more generally the truthfulness of the Prime Minister or any other honourable or right honourable member. Good temper, moderation must be maintained in parliamentary language, much of which we might be said today has already been said in response to the Prime Minister's statement on Tuesday. Previous debates on such motions are relatively short. Since 2010, the longest such debate has been for 1 hour and 29 minutes, and debates have been as short as 7 minutes. That said, an amendment has been selected, and this motion of great importance. The debate may continue for as long as it takes, unless either a successful closure to bring the debate to an end or we reach 5 o'clock, in which case the debate will be adjourned to a future day. I would also say, if it begins to become very repetitive, we then may have to consider whether to do a closure earlier, but I will leave that on how the debate develops. Any members wishing to speak need to stand to ensure they catch my eye and be at the beginning of this debate. So, the Right Honourable Member for Holborn and St Pancras has tabled a motion for debate on the matter of privilege, which I have agreed should take precedence today. I inform the House that although I have selected the amendment in the name of the Minister for the Cabinet Office, I understand it is now the intention of the Government not to move that amendment. So now we will start by calling Keir Starmer to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I beg to move the motion in my name and the other names on the order sheet for today. Mr Speaker, the motion I've tabled seeks to defend the simple principle that honesty, integrity and telling the truth matter in our politics. That is not a principle that I or the Labour Party have a special claim to. It's a British principle. It's a principle that's been cherished by Conservatives for as long as their party has existed, embraced by Unionist and Nationalist parties alike, and one that still guides members from every political party in this House. But
the opposition leader giving way. I lost my mother to COVID in the first lockdown. It was a very painful experience because she was in a hospital bed. We obeyed the rules. We could not be by her side when she passed. I have made my disquiet known to the Prime Minister a couple of times now, and he has taken that on board. I am deeply unhappy at the way Number 10 has performed over this period in question. But what I would suggest to the Right Honourable Member is that it's perfectly natural in this country that you weigh all the evidence before deciding on intent, because the central issue here is whether the Prime Minister misled Parliament. Would you agree that in us all accepting that it should be referred to the Privileges Committee, that committee needs to weigh all evidence before coming to a decision, and that includes the Sue Gray report.
Can I just say to others, interventions are meant to be short. What I would say, and I do say to us, if you're intervening and you are on the list, you will go aloud. I know the honourable member's not, and obviously wouldn't want to now he's made his speech. Here's
Can I just first say I'm sorry for the loss within your family, and we all send our condolences. I know how difficult it has been for so many during this difficult period. In relation to the substantive intervention, just 2 points, and I'll develop them later. The first is there is already a case before the House that's very clear. The Prime Minister said no rules were broken. 50 fines for breaking the rules and the law have already been issued, so there's already a reasonable case. But under the motion, because I do understand the sentiment behind the intervention, if the motion is passed, the committee will not begin their substantive work until the police investigations are complete, so that they will have all of that evidence before them, one way or the other, in order to come to a view. And I think that's within the body of the motion, and that's the right way and the way it should work. And I hope that does address the concerns that have been raised. I will.
Thank you for giving way. And further to that point of the honourable gentleman across the way, many of us in the Chamber have lost loved ones over the last period of time, and we feel greatly aggrieved that we haven't had the opportunity to have our day in court, if that's the way to put it, perhaps. We do feel the need to have justice seen for all those who have lost loved ones, those who passed away and who we miss greatly. Does the right honourable gentleman feel, when it comes to justice, while we do need to see all of the evidence, there also, at the end of that day, has to be accountability in this process, and accountability means people have to answer for what their actions have been?
Well, again, can I express my sadness at the loss that he and his family have endured? And I was struck particularly just a few months ago in the way that he spoke about that in this House. I think we all were. But on the substantive point, and this is really the point of the motion, this is about honesty, integrity and telling the truth in this place. And it's an important principle, and it's one we all share. As I say, I'm not claiming this as a Labour Party principle. It is a principle that we all share because we know the importance of it. That's why it's a matter for the House to consider. But it is a principle under attack because the Prime Minister has been accused of repeatedly, deliberately and routinely misleading this House over parties held in Downing Street during lockdown. Now, that's a serious allegation, because if it's true, it amounts to contempt of Parliament. And it's not, and it should never be, an accusation that is made lightly. And nor should we diminish the rights of members to defend each other from that accusation. But the Prime Minister's supporters don't seek to do that. Instead, many of them seek to simply dismiss its importance. They say there are worse crimes. He didn't rob a bank. He only broke the rules for 10 minutes. It was all a long time ago. Every time I will in just a moment. Every time one of these arguments is trotted out, the status of this House is gradually eroded, and our democracy becomes a little weaker, because the convention that Parliament must not be misled, and that in return we don't accuse each other of lying, are not curious quirks of this strange place. They're fundamental pillars on which our Constitution is built. And they're observed wherever parliamentary democracy thrives. With them, our public debate is elevated. When members assume good faith on behalf of our opponents, we can explore, test, interrogate our reasonable disagreements about how we achieve our common goals. Because ultimately, no matter which benches we sit on, no matter which whip we follow, fundamentally we are all here for one reason: to advance those common goals of the nations, of the peoples that make up our United Kingdom. And I give way.
Grateful to the Leader of the Opposition for giving way. And he mentioned
some of the arguments around, well, it was just 9 minutes. Well, I met a woman who was a daughter of a serviceman. He lost his life the week before that birthday party. And she said to me, what I wouldn't give for just 9 more minutes with him. I congratulate him on the way he's rising above party politics here, but to just diminish 9 minutes as just anything, it diminishes us all across both sides of this House. Would you not agree?
Well, I'm grateful for that intervention because it goes to the heart of the matter, because some have tried to suggest that a short period or there's some equivalence between these penalty notices and speeding, and that just doesn't understand the enormity of the difference. It's very rare that the whole of the nation goes through something together, a trauma together that was COVID. And there were the awful cases of funerals, of weddings that were missed, of parents who didn't see the birth of their children. And they're awful cases. But I think almost every family was marked during this period, including my own, by things that we didn't do that we would have liked to have done. Usually visiting elderly parents, seeing children. And there was a huge sense of guilt that we didn't do it, including in my own family. Guilt that because we followed the rules, we didn't do what we thought was actually right by our elderly relatives. And that's why it hurts so much. And that's why anybody trying to say this is just like a speeding ticket doesn't understand what this goes to politically and emotionally. And I will in just one moment, but just going back to the principles, because I want this debate to be about the principles, because I think this is where the debate should be. The committee will be charged if this motion goes through in determining actually whether there was any misleading, but this is about the principles that we all care about, and that's why I actually think that everybody should simply vote for this motion this evening to uphold those principles. Because those principles, that we don't mislead the House, and in return we don't call each other liars in this House, they ensure, I will in just a minute, they ensure that we make good decisions and avoid bad ones. It's what makes our democracy grow in ways that reflect the hopes and tackle the fears of those that we represent. It's what makes our democracy thrive. It's what makes this House thrive. It's what makes Britain thrive. And Mr. Speaker, we don't have to look far to see what happens when that faith is lost and there is no hope of reason resolving disagreements. When nations are divided, when they live in different worlds where their own truths and their own alternative facts, democracy is then replaced by an obsession with defeating the other side. Those we disagree with become enemies. The hope of learning and adapting is lost. Politics becomes a blood sport rather than a quest to improve lives. A winner-takes-all politics where inevitably everyone loses out. I will give way, and then I'll give way to Mike.
The Leader of the Opposition was big-hearted enough to say earlier that he unwittingly misled the House. I'm sure he'd agree with me that it's very important that we stick with the convention that we don't call each other liars. There's a good reason for that. 2 of our colleagues have been killed. There's been a lot of attacks on colleagues. So in this debate, can we just accept that everybody here is an honourable member, and when they speak here, they may unwittingly mislead the House, but they think that they were, for instance, abiding with the rules. So can we tone down the whole nature of this debate?
Thank you for that intervention, and I will try to keep within those parameters and elevate this to the principle that we're actually discussing today, which is the principles that we apply when we're debating in this chamber. I will give way behind.
I'm very grateful to my right friend for giving way, and also for what he's said about the fact that we don't on this side have a monopoly on truth. I think it's a very important point that he's made there. But does he agree with me that there's something really fundamental about this, and that is whether we, as members of Parliament, are fit to hold these powers that we have in terms of holding people to account, or whether the politics will always get in the way. And it was very disturbing to hear that
because there was a Labour chair, Conservative members might vote against it, and that's very disappointing. The honourable member for Rhondda felt he had to step down. But that principle that either we have an independent or we do it ourselves is very important here.
Well, I'm grateful for that intervention, and it is very important. We do have these procedures to hold us all to the rules of this House, and it's very important that they are applied in the right way, with the right principles. I will give way, because I said I would once more and then again here.
I'm grateful to him for giving way. He's making a very powerful speech. On the point of procedures, I wonder if you would agree with me that there is a bigger point here about Parliament's governance structures, that our whole system of checks and balances is completely out of date. It is beyond ludicrous that the arbiter of whether or not the ministerial code has been broken is the person who's accused of breaking it, in this instance the Prime Minister. Does he agree with me that we also need a wider look at those governance structures, which at the moment are simply not fit for purpose?
Absolutely. For that intervention, because I do think it's a very serious point, because a lot of our conventions and rules and traditions are based on the principle of honour, and that people, members of this House, wouldn't, other than inadvertently, mislead the House. And that's why the rules are set, but they're set on that proposition. And if there is a member of this House, whoever that is, that doesn't abide by those principles, those honourable principles, then that tests or stress tests the rules that we have. I'll take one more intervention and then I will give way.
I understand completely the position the honourable gentleman opposite said about toning down the rhetoric. I completely understand that. But let me just. I understand that position, but let me make this point, because I know the honourable gentleman over the years. We can't tone down the seriousness of this matter. Yes. I was in the Prime Minister's constituency earlier this week. It's the neighbouring constituency to mine, for London Borough of Hillingdon. We're campaigning in the elections. And yeah, there is some shift in vote from Tory to Labour because of this issue, but that isn't the significant issue. The significant was the number that we were finding totally disillusioned now, who'd had enough of this system, were blaming the system itself. That's what we're fighting for here. This is what we're campaigning for here. We're campaigning to restore the credibility in the democratic processes of our country.
And I'm grateful for that intervention. I think it's a really important and powerful point, because if we don't pass this motion, if we don't take this opportunity to restate the principles, then we are all complicit in allowing these standards to slip. We're all complicit in allowing the public to think we're all the same, nobody tells the truth, there are alternative sets of facts. I will in 1 minute. I've given away a lot and I do want to make some progress, but I'll try and come back to the honourable member. But because the conventions... I'll make some progress and I'll try to come back to people where I can. The conventions and the traditions that we are debating this morning are not an accident. They've been handed down to us as the tools that protect Britain from malaise, from extremism and from decline. And this is important because the case against the Prime Minister is that he has abused those tools. That's the case against him, that he's used them to protect himself rather than our democracy, that he's turned them against all that they are supposed to support. And members opposite know that the Prime Minister has stood before this House and said things that are not true, safe in the knowledge that he will not be accused of lying, because he can't be. He stood at the dispatch box and point-blank denied rule-breaking took place, when it did. And he did so, as he did so, he was hoping to gain extra protection from our good faith that no Prime Minister would ever deliberately mislead this House. He's used our faith, our conventions, to cover up his misdeeds. Because, I'll just finish this point, because after months of denials, of absurd claims that all the rules were followed, of feigned outrage at his staff discussing rule-breaking, we now know the law was broken. We know the Prime Minister himself broke the law. And we know that he faces the possibility of being found to have broken it again and again and again. Because the police investigation is ongoing, we don't need to make final judgment on the Prime Minister's contempt of Parliament today. When the time comes, the Prime Minister will be able to make his case. He could put his defence, of course he can. He can make his case that his repeated misleading of Parliament was inadvertent as his defence, that he didn't understand the rules that he himself wrote. He can make that defence. That his advisers at the heart of Downing Street either didn't understand the rules either or misled him when they assured him that they were followed at all times, or that he thought he was at a work event even while the empty bottles piled up. He can make those defences. He can make those defences when the time comes. But, Mr. Speaker, I will interest a minute. We already know he has a case to answer. The Prime Minister said no rules were broken, but over 50 fines for breaching the rules and the law have now been issued, including to the Prime Minister. And anybody who denies that simple fact has their head in the sand or has given up any interest in the truth, given up interest in the traditions of our nation in order to prop up a law-breaking Prime Minister. Now, the motion today would refer the matter to the Committee for Privileges, a committee that has a government majority. So no one can say the Prime Minister is not being judged by his peers. The committee would only investigate the Prime Minister for contempt once the police have concluded their investigation. So no one can say there is prejudice to the rest of the inquiry. And, of course, any findings the committee comes to, any sanctions they might propose, would then come back before this House as a whole, so no one can say it's too soon for the House to decide. It is a system of self-governance, and it should be, because with the great privilege that comes with sitting in this place comes the great responsibility to protect the conventions that underpin our democracy. I will give way.
I'm grateful to the honourable member for giving way. On conventions, does he also agree that language is equally important, and therefore would he take this opportunity to distance himself from the honourable member who spoke earlier on, who said that he wanted to lynch another honourable member, or the honourable member who sat right next to him, who put hands on this side, Tory scum, he should distance himself from them?
That's a shame. I actually thought we were having a reasonably serious debate. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Order. I'll just say to the Honourable Lady, she needs to sit down. In fairness to the member in charge, he's given a lot of interventions, but I certainly don't need you standing up and waiting to catch somebody's eye. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, if this just descends into a shouting match, we lose the principle which is there to defend all of us, including all the members opposite. We're not claiming a principle to support these benches or not those benches. It's a principle that supports all of us. And if we fail in our... I will take that intervention, yes, of course.